Cool. Right about one, so we'll get rolling and let some people trickle in. I presume you're here for FraudGPT, Generative AI, and Cybercrime. If not, that is what you're going to hear about. So I won't cross my arms like my photo. I'm Brady Harrison, the Director of Customer Analytics Solution Delivery at Kount, an Equifax company. Long title. Essentially, I help our customers make number go up. In general, though, that means reducing fraud. So we do a lot of fraud research and analysis for large e-commerce brands, banks, peer-to-peer payment methods, so kind of the full range. One thing that I'm excited about is generative AI, but professionally quite concerned is generative AI for scams. So that's what I want to talk about today, and the overall kind of cybercrime risk. There's a couple counters in here. Some people intimately familiar with Kount. Anybody else kind of familiar? Good question. Yeah, so we are acquired by Equifax in 2021. We were a digital fraud and identity company acquired by Equifax to kind of beef up their portfolio. It's been quite exciting post then because we've gotten into the FI or financial institution space, so working with banks and governments and stuff, which has been quite exciting, and has kind of opened us to this world of other risk that we now have to deal with. So we're moving way beyond, chargebacks and account takeover, kind of stolen credit card risk, to all the kind of ills that happen in the world. And so a personal interest, but as well as a professional one. So I'm going to give some background on machine learning, right? So kind of how did we get to where we are, right? So in essence, there are really two kind of common kind of classifications for machine learning algorithms. Who knows these classifications? Anybody intimately familiar? Okay, if I was getting all hands, we'll skip this is boring stuff. But in essence, you really are just trying to classify something like, hey, put all this stuff in a bucket. Like, hey, you show it a hot dog, and it's like, okay, is that a sandwich? Yes or no, right? And so then it's like, okay, clearly this is a sandwich. And then you show it a pizza, and you're like, not sandwich, right? So that's what we think of as like classification algorithms. Regression are we're trying to pick some or predict some kind of event. So for us, that's fraud. Could be risk for a bank, propensity to return, right? That's what Amazon does a lot, is, how do we get people to spend, right? And so that's where we do a regression algorithm. We're doing some kind of mathematical prediction. So regression is really supervised learning. So we want to predict some continuous value where it's from X to Y, and we just want to say, hey, this is where we're going, and somewhere in that scale, we make a determination, right? Yes, no, approve, deny the loan, right? Say yes or no to a transaction, right? Show someone a different kind of movie, right? That's where we think of that. And then classification is also supervised machine learning, where it's some kind of discrete value. Is hot dog, is not hot dog, right? Or what kind of consumer is this? So we have discrete bucketing groups rather than some like numerical value. We're like, this is this kind of customer, this is this kind of customer. So there's some other couple common ones that are kind of in between these, are like decision trees, k-nearest neighbors. And so this is where lots of people are today on the kind of the far left. We really are not using any kind of artificial intelligence. We're just using kind of basic A plus B expert system analysis, where we're using bots to kind of run some calculation and then make a decision. There's no real machine learning happening there. You can do lots of stuff, quite interesting gains in productivity, but not like true machine learning. Then there's AI, where it will do some kind of this process evaluation, but it's not truly like model building, where you're like telling it to make some decisions generally based on some kind of expert system. If X, then Y, then run through kind of the Rube Goldberg machine of analysis. Where things start to get interesting is where we really get into AI, including machine learning. And so machine learning is a branch of AI, where you're using machines. You say, hey, I'm going to give you a bunch of results, and then you learn about them. And then when I give you stuff that you don't know, tell me what you think. And so it would be like, I'm going to show you 1 million pictures of an apple. And then I show you something else that's an orange, and you're like, not an apple. Right? And you're like, crushed it, right? For us in fraud and identity, we're going to show you millions of good loans or bad loans, or good transactions and bad transactions. And then we give you a new one, and you say, what do you think? And then we'll say good or bad transaction. And then we get into real deep learning where we have these like complicated neural networks. So rather than us actually knowing the data that we give it, it will kind of generate its own connections. And so that's where we start to get into, did it go away? Oh, now we're back. And that's where we get this bucket of generative AI, where we're using these kind of advanced prediction algorithms and neural networks to say, hey, these things are similar, and we're not predicting a continuous value or categorizing, we're making a new thing. And so who here has used an LLM like ChatGPT or anything like that? Okay, everybody, sweet. You will be synthetic identity fraudsters by the end. We'll be all good to go. So in essence, it's fascinating. Like the transformer model in 2017 really makes this happen, where it says, I will give you a word, and then based on every book in the dictionary or every book in the English language and Swahili and French and Korean, you're going to say, after the is usually some kind of noun or some kind of word. And so it predicts and says, well, we think you said the deer. So then we're going to go, okay, well, what's the next most likely word? And so that's really just a really advanced statistical algorithm inside the transformer model. So that's what these generative AI models are doing, is basing up millions and millions and millions of data points that it's historically seen. What's the next thing? Or on a face, like an image, like what goes next to the eye? And it's like, well, statistically, another eye, right? And then there's like, maybe there's this ear thing, but it doesn't know what an ear is. It doesn't know what an eye is. It's just seen millions of human faces and know that they kind of generally look like this. And then they try to line them up and put them together. And so that's where we get this kind of generative AI bucket, where it's using advanced statistics and neural networks to make a new thing, which is super exciting, right? We can use it to talk with people, answer, hard questions that a kind of discrete Google search doesn't do very well. We can make new text from old text, summarize a lot down, but it doesn't have any kind of internal thinking or logic mechanism. It's kind of a statistical best practice. And then someone says, yeah, this was a good result or this was a bad result. And then the model kind of continues to train itself. So that's why there's some supervised stuff, like it's still machine learning, but there's still deep learning and neural networks, a lot of stuff going on. So why does this matter? So what it is a branch where there are kind of a class of algorithms where we make new content. We make new audio, images, video, text, using these kind of neural networks and deep learning. Right, everyone's used ChatGPT. Has anyone made an image with DALL-E? Okay, fewer people, right? And that generally tracks. Like people are really, really comfortable with the interface of ChatGPT. It's also free, so pretty common. You can use DALL-E to make images, which you'll see some DALL-E images in here. And then Sora is brand new. Has anybody heard about Sora? So Sora is where it's like ChatGPT, except in making text, it makes full-length video. So rather than just saying, hey, I want a picture of a dog wearing a hat, it'll be like, I want a video of a dog wearing a hat in France, and it will go based on millions of videos of what it thinks France looks like and what it thinks the dog looks like, and then say, hey, here's a dog wearing a hat in France. And this is a real leap. And 2 years ago, you'd think, oh, it's crazy that I can make an image of a dog wearing a hat, right? And now we're less than 18 months away from like the release of DALL-E widespread, and people are like making 20 or 30 minute videos with a short text prompt, right? Wild. You can also do audio. 11 Labs is an audio AI generated company, right? So if you've ever seen any of these AI generated songs like Hank Williams Jr. singing like Lil Wayne, so that kind of stuff is where you can take, hey, I have all of this old audio, someone's voice, and I have all of this new text, right? I know what a Lil Wayne song sounds like, or I know what like a Taylor Swift country song would be like, because it has a good idea of what country music is and has a good idea of what Taylor Swift is, and then they just jam them together, and then we make a net new thing. So this is cool. You can do fun, dorky, interesting things like make presentations, like I would lie. Some of this presentation is generative AI, right? Not all of it, but some of it, right? Really helpful for doing interesting stuff. The good thing is a lot of them have these robust protection layers in them. So if I'm like, hey, tell me how to make a nuclear weapon, ChatGPT is going to be like, no thanks. And those are what's called like a trust and safety layer. So you're not actually directly interfacing with generative AI. It goes through a translation layer. So if you're like, hey, do this thing, it's going to go, hey, based on what we know about our business, we're not going to do the thing. So we're going to pull back a little, or if you ask it, ethical questions. Sometimes you're like, should I kill 10 people or one dog? It's like, hey, this is really not for asking like kind of ethical questions. And so that's called the trust and safety layer. So like for image generation, right? This really came to a head like a month ago when someone made some explicit images of Taylor Swift. Generally, these algorithms say, I will not make photos of celebrities or any named person. Right? I've tried to make images of myself based on a reference image, and it's like, no, we're not going to use your face, which is great. This is this robust trust and safety layer that exists in between you and the model. The downside is, does anyone know how big one of these LLM or generative models are from like a gigabyte perspective? Massive? They're like 10 gigs maybe. So can fit on a laptop, a hard drive, and the technology is not that sophisticated, right? The model is pretty well defined. And so I could make my own LLM or make my own, generative AI model, store it on a laptop, remove the trust and safety layers, and then get it to do whatever I want. So that would be like, hey, write me a letter of how to scam somebody, which is what we're going to talk about. Or how do I make TNT at home, right? If that exists in the training data, which it would be easy to find that in the training data, then it will output that. It might get close, might go pounds for teaspoons and do weird conversions, but it'll get close. And so that's the scary bit. Everybody has these layers, but the technology is not in itself so sophisticated that you couldn't run one on like a laptop. So like, yeah, the initial GPT-1 model that OpenAI did was like huge, would fit on like a supercomputer. But people are saying that the training weights and the kind of whole transformer model for GPT 3.5, which is what most people in here have probably used, is like you could put it on a laptop. And so that makes it kind of scary. And so now what's the risk profile here when we don't have the kind of guardrails on this technology? And I'm not advocating for any kind of like policy adjustment or anything. This is just like the risk profile of what these tools can do and why these trust and safety layers exist. And so why I'm concerned is, what if someone is financially motivated to take off these trust and safety layers for these tools and technologies? And so has anyone...
Brady, is that how they become biased? So how do they become biased?
That is part of the training data, that if someone is showing them an image, you're probably referencing the Google Gemini thing that came out like 2 weeks ago. Yeah, so what they were doing is they probably over-indexed on some of their training data when you're like, generate a person that looks like this. And in those images, like the person was like always a white male. And they're like, hey, not representative of our sample of people, so let's adjust our weights a little, and then so we can get a more representative sample of like what the United States or the world looks like. People are saying they maybe overdid it, because you'd be like, hey, can I have a picture of George Washington? And you'd get like a black woman. Like, clearly this is great for image generation, but if we want historical data, then it kind of will miss a little, right? If you're like, hey, I want a historical figure, we know what that historical figure looks like. Like, I want Reagan riding a Mustang, right? Okay, we know what Reagan looks like. That's where you can get some kind of training bias. And so what probably happened there is when they were reviewing the results, they maybe over-indexed the training data or over-indexed the responses, where you like, hey, this was a good response, one direction or the other. And so that's the other critique of GPT-4, is it will give really kind of banal or like the safest version of a response. So it doesn't like, it will give you not the funnest response. It'll be like, what's the most like milquetoast plain response I can give? Because that's kind of what the training data is responding to. So all of this eventually, it's not magic, right? It's someone's like, I give you a thing, you predict a thing. Was it a good prediction, bad prediction? Then you can have some kind of underlying bias in the model there. So that's probably in their trust and safety layer, that they're having some kind of like, what people will actually do is the prompt that you give is not the prompt that the machine actually gets. They'll add layers of like, hey, only produce one image instead of 4 in the request. They might be putting like, hey, make the person look like this or have a higher chance. And so that's where you can get kind of drift for that kind of stuff. Has anyone ever here got a Nigerian prince scam email? Does anyone know who the Nigerian prince? Yeah, everybody. And so it used to be, you'd be like, oh, misspellings, right? They don't know my name. Like, there's an idea that, I think this is wrong, but the idea is that only dumb people will respond or get tricked by the Nigerian prince. So they put spelling errors in it. So smart people are like, obviously this is a scam because they spelled this word wrong, or there's like weird syntax. And the Nigerian scammers are like, I'm not going to talk to this guy for like 5 weeks if I know he's just messing with me. I don't think that's true. I think their English is probably just bad. And they don't have the capability of like, or desire, because like, hey, this is kind of working, so who cares, to do this. And so with LLM-based text, I don't have to, if I'm like a Nigerian scammer and I want to get people to send me cryptocurrency, I don't need to write a convincing email anymore. I can just say, hey, broken or jailbroken LLM model, write me a Nigerian prince scam email. And it will have perfect grammar. Or you can tell it like, hey, make some grammatical errors if that's kind of your vibe. I would not. Because then I only trick the dumb people. I want to trick the smart people too. And so I think what the common risk is, and this is actually, we'll see later, this is actually happening, is they either break these trust and safety layers to get it to do things it's not supposed to do, like, hey, write me a scam or a phishing letter or a spear phishing letter against this company. So that's why I think it's the end of the Nigerian prince. You're not going to get generic email, generic prince scam. You're going to get an email from your boss, your cousin, your neighbor, some affinity group that you're in. So like I might get it from, I'm like a mountain biking team or whatever, or some like fraud identity companies like, hey, we want to talk to you about this thing, because they know kind of my vibe. So you use some machine learning, hey, go find me 100 fraud and identity people, write them a letter, use some tokenization to be based on their company, their role, their location. And so rather than writing one letter and sending it to 10 million people and X of 1% response, now I'll send 10,000, and now my hit rate is maybe 50%, 30% of getting people to respond. And so I think the Nigerian prince is going away. It really allows people to generate phishing or spear phishing is when you like target one individual person. Phishing is more of a broad thing, but now I can do it at scale. I don't have to type out individual letters. I can be like, hey, Brady, it's X person from college or your buddy from the football team in high school. And I don't know if this person exists or not. And so rather than sending a letter that I'll never click on, hey, Nigerian prince, I'm in jail, I might open a letter from the College of Idaho, right? The weird domain, like, maybe. I might open that letter and then go like, looks like the president of the college email. It has my major, right? I'm like, I'll open this email. And then I can interact with that person. And where in the past, if I got past that second layer, oh man, now I got to staff up all these people to talk to dummies like Brady in a chatbot. I can now just use an LLM to talk to Brady. Like, hey, respond to this dude and answer questions based on his background. So then I can kind of respond easily. Then we take it to another level. So rather than having me to make a fake website, and I spend all this time looking like, what does College of Idaho look like? Where is it? Like, hey, go generate a fake College of Idaho website based on kind of their colors and their information, write the code for it, make all the images, and then send Brady to it. And I was like, oh, well, yeah, I want to donate to this college thing. I get a credit card portal from some sketchy PSP provider in like the Netherlands or Eastern Europe, and all of a sudden now you're taking scam credit card payments in what could be a couple hours versus days and days of like hunting and finding these people. So that's the real risk on the consumer side. That before you could be like, hey, this face doesn't look real, this email looks junk, like sketchy website. Now, it's like a Wix, like super nice website. All the images look real. All the text is like really polished, maybe even looks too formal. And now all of a sudden we got a real problem on our hands because I'm not sending millions of letters. I might send a couple thousand, right? I could target every College of Idaho graduate, or I could target anybody who works at Kount or anybody who attended Hackfort, right? That is now we start to get into a real risk scenario. I don't need high command of the English language to, create problems here. On the other side of it, now I can have fake customers as well. So I'm trying to sell my business or appear bigger than I am, right? I can generate fake customers using generative AI. Where before I'm like typing out abc@gmail.com. And I'm like abc1@gmail.com. Now I can say, hey, LLM, generate me 10,000 customers with a real address, a real name, right? They don't really have to match up, but give me an address, a name, and an email for 10 million customers, and generate a fake account balance, fake activity, fake profile pics. I'd be like, okay, so then it will just sit and churn out identities. Probably wouldn't use those for risks, but same with invoices, right? I could spin up a fake invoice, fake documents. Just recently, generative AI beat, does anybody know what KYC is? Know Your Customer? Part of the Patriot Act, where if like you open a bank account, you have to confirm that person's identity to make sure they're not part of a transnational terror or drug smuggling ring, kind of a money laundering plus risk thing. And so what it is, it makes sure you are a real person. Well, historically, if I take a photo of a face with an ID, right, it's gonna know there's like Photoshop or like something's off. Like a month ago, 2 months ago, they found that these kind of tools break like 90% of Know Your Customer checks. So I don't even have to have a real driver's license. I don't have to have a real face. I can have a image plus driver's license. How many people have taken a photo with their face with their driver's license like this? Raise your hands. A couple of people, right? If you sign up for like Turo, like renting a car or anything like that, they'll make you do that. Well, now 90% of the time, if I'm not interacting physically with that business, I could create a new account, right? And then do all kinds of funky business. So this spear phishing is, the real concern is spear phishing, not like, okay, Nigerian prince going away, like Hackfort going away. The real risk is sending a direct message to one person with video and voice that makes sense to me. What estimations on how long to copy a human voice and to defeat biometrics? We got 2 seconds. Low, anyone lower, higher? 30 seconds. 30?
How long would it take for a generative algorithm to copy something?
Yeah, how much audio do I need to copy a human voice?
Probably a minute or under.
Okay, so you guys must be doing some pre-reading. It's like 3.7 to 2.7 seconds, depending on the video. So you call somebody, you get a scam call and you answer, say a couple words, that's enough, right? This presentation is way enough. And so, right, if somebody calls me, there's a real chance that that is not the human voice on the other end of that phone call. That could be, you record an Instagram story, a presentation like this, I'm screwed. I record like hundreds of hours of video like this. And so that's a real problem. What about photos? Copy a human face. Voice, right, it's one dimensional, right, nothing else. Human face, 1,000 photos, one photo. Okay, man, crushing it. It's like 12 to 15, especially if they're all straight on, it's more like 30. But if you do some like shifts, it's like 15. So it doesn't take very much to copy two of the things that we think are really inherently ours, our voices and our faces. And if I can copy a face, I can copy video, right? And that's where we start to have issues. And so on the top, we have some reference images of like, hey, this is what a man, woman, like younger man, younger woman look like. And then we take some reference images and it doesn't know like what glasses are and it doesn't know what eyes are, but it says, hey, I can kind of approximate these two things together to make a new thing, some new face, some new identity. And so rather than me having to have hundreds of thousands of reference images of you and your driver's license to copy your identity, it's like your Instagram story and your profile picture, a couple profile pictures. And now we got a problem on our hands. We really got a fraud stew going. And so this is the real risk, is not like, okay, scams, but you get a phone call from your child, your partner, they're certainly in distress. It's coming from their phone number with their voice. Even a video call, you get their phone number, their voice, their video. You're like, well, why wouldn't that be my husband, partner, child? And this is where we're starting to get to generative AI scams. So that thing that I mentioned, not a joke. We're starting to see people are getting phone calls from, hey mom, somebody has me, I'm in danger, come get me, you need to send this amount of money. And it's from her daughter's phone number with her daughter's voice, clearly in distress, where 20 years ago, you maybe get like the, oh, my nose is broken, that's why my voice sounds funny, or the connection's bad. Now it's a crystal clear version of their face and voice, which creates a lot of internal distress for me, because like this is pretty risky, right? This is a real risk scenario that's actually happening. Did anyone hear the story like a couple weeks ago of the woman who like put $50,000 in a shoebox because she thought it was she was part of like she thought she was James Bond, like there's like an FBI investigation. This is like continuing to happen over and over. So not a theoretical risk. I was thinking about this like in early 23. I was like, this is gonna be a dumpster. And then later 23, this like really starts to happen. And so did anyone see this is I think the scariest one is like in November, somebody gets a call from their boss, hey Brady, I need you to wire $20 million to this bank account. And they're like, I've watched all this training, like I'm gonna make sure that this is my boss. So the guy's like, okay, call me. And the guy calls him, here's his boss's voice. Okay, well, still feeling a little weird. So he gets on a Zoom call. He has his boss, the VP, the SVP, the other two controllers are all there, voice and video. And he's like, well, there's like all 10 of us are here and all people are saying like we should send this money. Come to find out there was only one human being on that phone call. There were 8 instances of generative AI voices and faces convincing this dude to send money. And so this is where investors or banks are really at risk, where we're like, oh my God, this is kind of scary, right? I can't depend on a human voice or a human face to confirm that this is actually the human I'm talking to. Fingerprints are good enough, right? Other than like getting your fingies cut off. They're harder to fake in just like a image. But if someone does have one, like there's ideas that you technically can print one and then put it over your finger. But like on your phone is probably safe. But like the facial recognition stuff is starting to get off, right? Like, maybe this is not actually gonna get it done. Like eye biometric, people are saying like maybe it's still good enough, but just face, just voice. 81% of consumers said they would use voice verification to protect their financial accounts. Does anyone here have voice verification to log into their bank? Don't, would be a great first step. Because people think it's safe, like who's copying my voice, right? But that is really easy to fake, and people, what people think is secure and what is actually secure are, that's where the risk is, right? If you're a high net worth individual, I would be really concerned about any of my accounts that are using my face or my voice to authenticate, or my phone number. That's a talk for a different day.
Just part to that, like how much is this targeting someone who's not high net worth? Like, is someone who has $10,000 to their name just as at risk as someone who has 500,000?
Unfortunately, the mechanism is a little different. Rather than convincing you to send me a bunch of money, the common thing today is using generative AI to convince young men and women that they're talking to someone they're attracted to, getting them to send some illicit content, and then blackmailing them for that content to get them to pay. So that's also, be worried about anybody you're talking to. Those people are being targeted. So they're not necessarily high net worth, but they know they're in a compromised position and are more willing to send $10,000 to $20,000 because they don't want their special photos going around their high school. This happened in a middle school in California like a month ago.
Wait, how would a middle schooler get access to that kind of money?
They generally flow up to their parents, and then they have a kind of, that would be a not very fun sit-down discussion. And so that's like where high net worth people are really, really at risk. Like anybody with lots of cryptocurrency is like super at risk, but kind of broad spectrum of folks. On the investor side, there's some risk on the other end of it. I was not joking when I talked about creating fake customers. Has anyone heard of Frank? So this woman had a student loan startup that she wanted to sell. Market's like hyper frothy, meaning like there's lots of sales going around. And she's like, man, we're really not getting the pickup in order to get a really nice multiple and sell this business. So she went to her internal data scientist and said, hey, I want you to make 10x the number of customers that we have. Provide them fake emails, fake statements of payment, fake loan balances, fake degrees, fake colleges. And the guy was like, okay. He's like, I love committing a felony. And then he was like, generated a bunch of identities. And JP Morgan Chase was like, oh man, we got this. The student loan thing is like the next great place to make money, which like, let's put that aside. But they were like, this is great. We're going to buy Frank. And they purchased Frank for like $125 million. Started digging into the details, talking to their customers. Oh, 90% of your customers don't exist. And so people are not just tricking consumers to sending money or institutions, but tricking investors into spending money. This happened with another similar chat company based in California where people are using generative AI for ill, right? You wouldn't even have to break one of these models to say, hey, make 1,000 different test identities, right? I could sit and do this on my phone.
There's legitimate purposes for that.
There are plenty of legitimate purposes for these, generative AI networks. So scary, right? There were about $8.8 billion in fraud consumer losses in 2022. I would expect this to not shrink, right? We're starting off 23 with a couple billion in the hole. So I think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. On the consumer side, I mentioned this in the same vein a little earlier, right? So these are not theoretical risks, right? This is not science fiction, right? This is an unfortunate practical reality, right? In China, a man was scammed for about 800,000, I believe, about 4.3 million yuan. He said his friend calls him, investment scheme, hey, Brady, I got this great idea for you. All you got to do is send me, $30,000. And he's like, okay, great. Send him $30,000. He's like, cool. First investment comes in, I give you 40,000 back. And he's like, oh, this rocks. And then does it again. Eventually, he comes to find out this is not his friend, and he got tricked into sending millions and millions and millions of RMB to a fraudster, right? That money then gets laundered and moved all around the world, right? There's some theory that a lot of this scam and abuse stuff are Russian, not state actors, but people who are not necessarily being prosecuted by the Russian state because they kind of don't care. There's some North Korean state-sponsored activity going around here, and a lot of cybercrime groups in Southeast Asia who are really using human trafficking to interact and respond to these people in these scam groups. And so we haven't talked about romance scams, but that's the next kind of level. The United States, lots of older people who are single and kind of lonely, right? Pandemic, right? Other kind of isolation stuff. And so they're getting messages from attractive men and women around the world, convincing them that they do have value. And I really, really want to see you. I just can't afford the ticket to the United States. These are called the romance scams. So in the past, you'd have to have somebody who could speak English pretty well, right? Take some photos, where now I can have generative AI texts to get people into the funnel. Has anyone here got a text message out of nowhere that really seems like non sequitur from any? It's not like, hey Brady, how's it going, right? And it looks like an old friend. It's like the wrong name, or like they just injected a question right in the middle of a conversation. These are the first bits of a scam phishing attempt, probably a romance scam. If you're a man, very likely. That's probably the start of a romance scam where they're going to use generative AI to respond to your text and get you kind of believing that you're talking to a real human on the other side of it. And again, not theoretical. Since ChatGPT went into kind of open beta where people can actually use it, email phishing attempts went up 1,200%. Right? So this is just massive increase because I don't have to write scammy emails anymore. I can just generate them at scale and generate them targeted to individual populations of consumers. So scary stuff, right? So what do we do about it moving forward?
Have you tried GPT yet?
I have not. My presentation is called FraudGPT because that's actually a GPT model that you can buy online that's pre-seeded with scam and phishing emails. So it's all about training. And so it's man, I really want to write that best scam email. You know what would be really helpful? 1,000 scam emails. And so there's these kind of worm GPT or alternative LLM models that, one, don't have a trust and safety layer, and two, are trained on scarier data sets, right? So I want to make illicit content. I'm going to show my fake LLM lots of illicit content so it knows what that looks like. Or I'm going to send it a bunch of scam emails or fake investor relation. All the good, cool stuff you can do with generative AI models. Think of all the bad stuff you could do with it as well. And so that's the real risk. And it doesn't take a lot of technical acumen to get these going, right? You can build a new GPT on AI. GPT is shorthand for these LLM. GPT is kind of a trade name for them. But you can make custom ones and then resell them even on OpenAI. They have a robust trust and safety layer, so they prevent all kinds of abuse. But it's not very hard to make a new one, right? It fits on a laptop, really easy, give the training data, give some responses, you got a stew going. So real risk. The scary bit is people think we should use AI to fight AI. And we'll use AI to kind of detect it. So this AI generated image even matched my pants for today. I am none so attractive. Also don't wear glasses. Does anyone for people who have kind of spent some time around these, does anyone recognize anything that's kind of off?
Simple example is the Patagonia text on your jacket.
Yep, so the logo is wrong. Let's see if we got them in order.
The word generative.
Yep, you guys are in order.
The coloration and contours on your face look off. The contours look too extreme in the pictures.
Yeah, so they're kind of soft, right? It doesn't know where a face stops or starts. Again, they're not looking at faces. They're just predicting the next thing based on what it's seen a lot of. So it's seen a lot of guys giving conference presentations, and so it's like, well, generally this is then next to this is next to this. It doesn't know generative is a word, so it kind of just makes stuff up. And so one, misspelled or nonsensical words, kind of talked about soft edges, strange logos. No one talked about hands. That was the hot thing for 5 weeks when people are like, oh, if you don't see hands, it's a generative AI image. And then it was like, oh, if you see hands but the fingers are messed up, then it's a generative AI image. Well, now, since we talk about blurry edges, now the risk is that was true 6 months ago, 9 months ago. Did anyone see the Will Smith video talking about what it looked like a year ago to what it looks like today? We're seeing exponential improvement. So these kind of rules of thumb that you would use to spot generative stuff today will likely not work a year from now, maybe not even a month from now, as these are we're in the real cycle of improvement. We're getting really large gains very quickly. And so that's why, in my view, I think the kind of defensive approach where you're analyzing the image itself is a losing battle, right? This technology is going to continue to get better and better and better, where it will be indistinguishable. Because guess what an AI model is really good at? Learning from feedback. And so it will continue to learn based off of negative feedback. This is an actual technique called generative adversarial networks, where we have two models who fight each other to try to kind of gain supremacy. I don't think transparently that's going to be the way to go, right? Analyzing hundreds of millions of hours of voice and video is going to be very, 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 very challenging, right? Just from the storage cost, and you're just going to get beat, right? There's an AI generated voice company that just came out, and they get beat 80% of the time by a high quality AI voice. So this guy tested it and he's like, yeah, I can beat the AI detection software 75% of the time, which for when you get a W, you don't have to win 100% of the time. You just got to win once, right? I don't have to convince the voice company that it's Brady 100% of the time. I just have to convince them one time to get into Brady's accounts, talk to Brady's wife, right? Talk to Brady's work, right? I only got to get in one time. And so it's kind of a defensive posture that's not very fun, right? You have to be essentially 100% accurate if you're going that direction. In my mind, we still should use artificial intelligence and machine learning to kind of fight these problems. Expert-based systems look for the fingers, right? Look for blurry logos is just not going to work long term. So there's really two offensive technologies that either you confirm the video. So when the video is taken or uploaded, you have to review the video for, hey, this looks like it was actually recorded by a real device and it has location information and the kind of stuff that your phone would have about that image. That's going to be pretty hard because you have to be hey, Facebook, you need to do this, and hey, Instagram, and hey, Twitter, and every place where video gets uploaded, you have to offensively record every single piece of information about that content, which would be challenging, right? Everybody got to agree on a standard, and then it's this big battle to beat those systems. The other option, I think, is actually kind of pulling back. So rather than setting the terms of engagement and fighting this AI on its own grounds, well, let us pick the battlefield. In my mind, that's probably based on data. So I can't confirm that an image is real for identity purposes, or I can't confirm that a face is real, but I can, based on the underlying consumer data or identity data, that this person is real, right? So if somebody tries to listen to my voice, easy to fake. But is this Brady's actual device? Is this Brady in the correct location? And so I think generative AI adversarial networks for that kind of stuff will really be the path forward. And so in our vein, I'm not able to say that this human face doesn't exist because I'll probably always lose. But I can say, hey, that identity has never existed in the United States. Social security number doesn't exist, no connection with that identity, right? There's no birth certificate, right? I can't tell if a driver's license is fake or not just from an image, or it's quite challenging. Why don't I just go ask the DMV? That's a real driver's license, right? So it's really changing and letting them fight on your own terms. So rather than, oh, I got to predict if an image is fake, like let's see if the person is real based on an underlying data perspective is the way generally people are going with this. So I can't prevent grandma from sending $10,000 to a scammer by interdicting that phone call, but I probably can say grandma on a fixed income should not send $10,000 to a brand new bank account in the Philippines. That's a risk scenario. So then like, hey grandma, let's have you go into the bank. You're like, yep, I'm Filipino. Like I have family there. Okay, sure. Let's confirm that transaction in the bank. And that's the way that we can kind of break this cycle of activity by removing the financial incentive. The other part of it is stakeholder awareness, right? It's old school, and some people like kind of chuff at this, but I think a passphrase could be potentially really helpful. So a passphrase that you never write down or communicate to anyone else other than the person, and then you can use that to confirm identity. And it should change, right, and be something that is really weird to ask. It shouldn't be like, what street do we live on, right? It should be totally closed signal information. So my wife and I have like a little like phrase that we use to really know if someone's asking for financial information or to send money, you know, we have to confirm the like secret phrase, which like is easily broken, right? There's a lot of problems with it, but as an individual consumer, you don't really have a ton of options. That can be an effective one. Like, hey, I will not call you because I'm in jail unless I say X, Y, Z. And then I really got in trouble and I need some assistance. That can be helpful, right? Educating stakeholders. Hey, grandma, don't answer the phone if you don't know the number. Or I'm only going to talk to you in this method. And so if you get an email from somebody who's not me, it's not me, right? And so that's where you can educate all kinds of people younger than you, right? Your stakeholders who are kids. Hey, before you send any, stuff, like you should probably make sure this person actually exists, right? And there are people out there trying to do you harm using these tools, right? Older folks, same way, right? We haven't really touched on the disinformation side of it. That's like a whole nother animal. I think 2024 is going to be extra bad. There's going to be a lot of fake Joe Bidens and fake Donald Trumps rolling around. So like that stuff is a whole sidebar of concerning. But that's where we really have to educate, like, hey, just because you see a face, hear a voice, see a video, like people are like, oh, that's photoshopped. Take that same kind of mental model and framework and apply it to essentially everything you see, right? Kids were like, don't believe everything you read on the internet. And you're like, come on, like, okay, it's on Wikipedia, it's probably fine. But now it's like, definitely don't believe everything you read on the internet unless it's like really confirmed from trusted sources. And the last bit are more some practitioner stuff, like, do we see weird stuff like grandma is like really stressed talking on the phone, or she's like making a transfer that's odd, or Brady doesn't usually make transfers that look like this looks odd, or weird stuff is happening, overall, right? I think a data-driven approach to dealing with this and investigating is key, right? The investigator side, right, if you work in an investigative role, you can't just be like, well, I have a license from, the medical board, like probably fine. Like, no, I probably should confirm that license is valid and exists, right? Or, hey, we have X number of customers. Like, let's confirm that you actually have those customers. Let's do some due diligence there. That's really the kind of prevention strategies, is not talking our own book, but I really think folks who are like, we're going to predict AI with challenging the video, I think is a losing battle. I would not challenge tens of thousands of people who only have to be successful one time to create a problem. I'm on the data side. I think that's really the way to do it for these kind of identity problems. I don't have solutions for the disinformation stuff. That's going to be a mess, and going to get a lot worse in 24 before it gets better. The upside, I think the data stuff is going to solve some of the scam stuff, make it a lot better. People are losing their houses today because of these scams, and I think some data interdictions, for that customer is going to be the way this is going to have to go. So that's what I have. We have some time for questions. Hopefully this was not totally doom and gloom. Risk, but some opportunity to help.
I would ask, what would you expect to be, I would say, the acceleration rate? What would you say, how long do you expect this sort of information to be the most accurate applications you can make, and how long would you say until everything needs to be reconsidered, you need to come back and go find out what's current? How fast do you think this is accelerating?
Well, this is a two-player game, right? Fraud and identity stuff is always it's like a chess match. We make changes, and they react, and then they make changes, and then we react, and so it will accelerate pretty quickly. There's always like this lagging approach where, if you're like the central bank of like Bangladesh, which got taken for a ride with one of these scams for like $1 billion in like 2018. You probably need to like way stay on the forefront because your risk is super high, but you're like a small community bank. This like scam stuff is going to be your like financial hell for like a decade. We still see like phishing attempts on phone numbers, which are like way easy with modern tech tools to get around, still target. So it's just kind of it all flows downhill. So the hyper sophisticated state actors, this will somewhat be irrelevant in like 12 to 18 months. For non-state actors, like your random fraudster group, this will probably be the next like 5-ish years probably. And then they'll target some other form of abuse, like cryptocurrency, like scamming will continue, but it will be breaking into exchanges, right? They'll just target a different vector. So job security, right? Fraud is a never-ending battle, but it will get better.
So I think I heard you say that you didn't think facial recognition was good security, like for your investment accounts. So I have apps that,
Yeah.
so what do you recommend?
So the device identification, it can be okay, but for like face, like Apple's is supposed to be really solid. Thumbprint is probably fine. What I really like is device authenticators. So where rather than getting an external text message, which can be either taken by someone else, right? People can read your text messages if there's like, they set up this little thing called a stingray that can intercept your text messages. Those kind of freak me out, like over the phone codes. So I always use like an authenticator. So I put in my password and then it sends me a unique code that lasts for like 30 seconds, but that code only goes to my phone. That's what I like. Unfortunately, a lot of providers don't do that, where that's not available. Even like big financial entities don't do it. But the thumbprint stuff is like probably fine.
How long will thumbprint be good for?
That one's harder because you would have to interject and like have the phone and like, get a copy of someone's thumbprint. Unknown, but it's like, what's your risk threshold? Are you like the CFO of a bank? You're like, you probably should do something else. But you're like personal consumer, like the thumbprint is probably gonna be fine for a long time.
I was just going to say, some of the financial institutions are going back to the old fobs.
Yes.
Yeah, where it's a random number, and you have to input that number, so you have to have that fob. Forget the phone.
That's kind of the inherent part of security, that I have to have the thing
Yeah.
to do it. I saw a question over here. No? Hallucinating?
This is something that I'm newly terrified of, because I had a child 4 months ago, and I'm in groups that are very adamant about keeping your child's photos off the internet for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
But this one's kind of one of my forefronts. Like, what are your thoughts on that, or how do you have anything to say in that realm?
Yeah, setting the social media like potentially bad aside, right? Bad for our brains, probably bad for society. From they're gonna get photos taken of them independent of your desire to post them, right? CCTV footage, right, at school, other parents. So I think privacy is going to continue to be a challenge, right? Probably best practice, that's what I would do, but it's a losing battle to try to be like, oh, I'll never have my face anywhere on the internet ever. Like, that's just kind of a part of life. I've accepted it, my face is all over, but like LinkedIn, I was like everywhere. But we just have to change our security posture, that your face is no longer your password. It's just your face.
It's hard for you to probably actually real 2FA changes to where you can actually use like a UBP or use a passcode, because right now a lot of like on my bank it's just SMS or email, and you see that as the like basis of 2FA, but it's really not.
Yeah, it's changing in our conversations, or my conversations, again, speaking in my personal capacity. With banks, they understand that these are risks. Some of it is some like technology inertia, that what customer expectations of what secure is and what is actually secure, there's a wide gap. And so consumers are like, I want the text message. And the bank's like, please, can we stop sending the text message? And so that's changing. Really high sophistication ones are trying to pick, like, okay, well, now we got to integrate it and support it. And so then it's some kind of technological inertia versus it's not that they totally misunderstand the risk. They're like, we just have so many things to work on that we're just working on other stuff. And then our consumers are telling us they don't want it. So you're like, hey, spend $2 million changing our MFA strategy that 1% of your consumers will use and the rest are going to hate. And so they're like, oh, this is kind of, but people are trying to go dynamic like most places are doing. If you want OTP, you can do OTP. If you want the kind of other kind of authenticator, like a YubiKey, like a physical authenticator or device-based authenticator, they're starting to become more common. So like I use like the Google authenticator, and as well as some other ones. And I've seen it become more and more common that people are accepting these alternatives. I hate getting SMS, MFA. It just like freaks me out every time because I'm like, hope there's not a stingray. Hope every time my phone stops working, like I'm an AT&T customer and they had like a day-long outage, was so stressful because I'm like, no one's like, hey, do you use AT&T? Like, I have no idea what other people use. And I'm just like, oh my God, my phone is not working. I'm definitely getting SIM swapped right now. And it's very scary. And so I hate OTPs, and any place that uses OTP, I always turn MFA on. And then if they have OTP, I always turn OTP off and then do some other kind of MFA. And there's some places that only do OTP, but most are trying to move to OTP plus some other option, like OTP or over the phone, or they're doing push app. That's a really common one, is that you push to the app and you have to log in to your device and use some kind of either thumbprint or other authentication is now becoming more common, which that will resolve some of this stuff. That's separate from scams, Gen AI, but a real scary proposition. I think I have time for one more. Clear the room.
With all the AI use and increase of phishing, what's right now? I mean, I've seen it in my work. It's crazy. We train people. We have tools that do their best, but half the time they're making use of compromised accounts already to send these phishing emails. So your regular it's passing all the regular checks. What tools are you using can you use AI against AI?
Some people are trying to do the can you predict AI text with AI, and they're like failing spectacularly, like 50%, which maybe for like a scam email is like good enough. You're like, hey, this email looks like it was generated with AI, so we're gonna flag it as potentially like suspicious. That's probably good enough. It's all about this like dynamic friction. Like, what's our risk profile here to how much it costs us and how effective it is? Like, kind of effective, cheap, like, okay, sure. For that, it's again education. Like, hey, we're not going to ask you to send money randomly, or we're not going to ask you to send pictures randomly. In general, it's just like, I don't know this email, like delete. Right? I think that's going to be way more common. Is like anything that doesn't come from somebody I know, like right in the dumpster. Which helps if you get a lot of like cold sales emails, and you're like 90% of these done, right? And then don't even have to think about it. But a risk, it's all education. Right? Some will technology, but we can't wait for people. We're still waiting for people to implement multi-factor, which this has been a risk for like 5 years. Still waiting for that. And we can't just like wait for the technology. We kind of have to, as consumers, be on extra caution. So just like one more thing to worry about. And on that delightful note, thank you very much. Here's my contact info. Post on LinkedIn a lot if you want to kind of hear my net new thoughts, as well as if you want to connect. So thank you.